I was born in the small village of Bethany, a place where the sun kisses the earth with a warmth that feels like a gentle embrace. My name is Lazarus, and my story is one not of my own making, but one that was woven by the hands of fate and the divine. As I walked through the dusty streets, the murmur of the market filled the air, the scent of fresh bread and the bleating of sheep creating a symphony of life. My sisters, Mary and Martha, were well known in our community for their hospitality and faith, but it was not their kindness or our family's modest wealth that would set our lives on an extraordinary path. It was something far greater, something that would challenge everything we knew about life and death. One day, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows over our home, I felt a strange heaviness in my chest. It wasn't just the fatigue from a day's labor. It was as if a shadow had begun to creep over my soul. Mary, ever the intuitive one, noticed my discomfort. "Lazarus, you look pale. Are you unwell?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. I tried to dismiss it. "Just tired, Mary. Perhaps I need rest." But even as I spoke, I knew this was no ordinary ailment. The next morning, the weight had not lifted. Instead, it had grown, and with it, a fever that seemed to consume me from within. Martha, always the caretaker, insisted on calling for the physician, but deep down I knew no earthly remedy could touch what was afflicting me. Days turned into nights, and nights into days, each moment blending into the next in a haze of pain and prayer. Mary and Martha never left my side, their prayers echoing through our home, a desperate plea to the heavens for my recovery. But as my condition worsened, whispers began to spread through Bethany. "Has God forsaken Lazarus?" they murmured, their faith wavering like the flickering candles beside my bed. In my delirium, I heard tales of a man from Galilee, a carpenter's son named Jesus, who performed miracles. Some said he could heal the sick, even raise the dead. But he was far, traveling from town to town, and time was something I felt slipping away like sand through my fingers. The question that hung in the air, thick with the scent of incense and fear, was not just whether I would survive, but whether faith itself could endure this trial. The village, once a place of simple joys and communal support, now seemed to shrink under the weight of my illness. As the days passed, the atmosphere in our home grew heavier. Mary, with her gentle spirit, often sat by my bedside, reading from the scrolls of our ancestors, her voice a soothing balm to my fevered mind. "Lazarus," she whispered one evening, her eyes reflecting the dim light of the oil lamp. "Do you remember the story of Elijah and the widow's son? How he raised him from death?" I nodded weakly, the effort to speak too great. Her words, however, sparked a faint hope within me, a hope that perhaps this Jesus, if he were truly sent by God, might hear our cries. Martha, on the other hand, was less philosophical and more practical. She busied herself with tasks, her way of coping with the fear that gripped her heart. "I've sent word to Jesus," she told me one morning, her voice firm yet trembling. "He must know of your plight. Surely he will come." The days stretched on, each one marked by the slow, painful progression of my sickness. The village's initial concern had turned into a palpable tension. People avoided our home, not out of disdain, but from a fear that whatever had befallen me might be contagious, not just in body but in spirit. One afternoon, amidst the quiet that had become our new normal, a visitor arrived. It was Eleazar, a close friend and a man of some influence in Bethany. He entered with a somber expression, his eyes avoiding mine. "Lazarus," he began, his voice low, "I've heard from Jerusalem. Jesus has received the message, but he remains there. He says this sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it." The words were meant to comfort, but they stirred a storm of emotions within me. Hope, doubt, frustration, and a flicker of anger at the thought of being a mere instrument for divine glory while I lay dying. Mary, sensing my turmoil, took my hand. "We must trust Lazarus. If Jesus says it is for glory, then it must be so." That night, as the fever raged within me, I found myself wrestling not just with my physical ailment, but with my faith. Was it enough to believe in miracles, or did true faith require something more? The whispers of doubt grew louder, mingling with the prayers of my sisters, creating a cacophony in my mind. The next day brought no relief, but a new challenge. A group of Pharisees from Jerusalem came to Bethany, their arrival stirring unease among the villagers. They sought to question Mary and Martha about their faith, about this Jesus, and about the rumors of his miracles. Their presence was a reminder of the larger world outside our small village, a world that viewed Jesus with suspicion and fear. As they spoke with my sisters, I could hear their probing questions from my sickbed. Why do you cling to this man? What makes you think he can save your brother? Their skepticism was palpable, and it seemed to seep into the very walls of our home, challenging the fragile hope we held on to. In the midst of this, I felt a profound loneliness, not just from my isolation due to illness, but from the realization that my suffering had become a battleground for belief. The conflict was not just within me, but was now echoing through the streets of Bethany, setting the stage for a confrontation that would test the faith of many. As the Pharisees continued their interrogation, Mary's voice, usually soft and comforting, rose with a newfound strength. We do not cling to Jesus out of desperation, but out of faith, she declared, her eyes meeting the stern gaze of the religious leaders. He has shown us the way to God, not through fear, but through love and miracles that speak of a power beyond our understanding. Martha, standing beside her, added, our brother's life is in God's hands, and if Jesus, who has spoken of God's glory, chooses to act, it will be in his time, not ours. The Pharisees, unyielding, pressed further. But what if this Jesus is a false prophet? What if your faith leads you astray? Their words were like stones thrown into the still waters of our home, creating ripples of doubt. That evening, as the sun set, casting an orange glow over Bethany, the tension was palpable. The village, once a place of communal harmony, now felt divided. Some whispered in support of Mary and Martha's faith, while others echoed the Pharisees' skepticism. My condition worsened, the fever now a relentless fire within me. In my fevered state, I heard the voices outside, the debates about Jesus, about faith, about the very essence of what it meant to believe. It was as if my illness had become a catalyst for a spiritual upheaval in Bethany. Mary, ever the beacon of hope, knelt beside me, her prayers now more fervent than ever. Lord, if you are willing, you can make him well, she whispered, her voice breaking with emotion. Her faith was unwavering, yet I could sense the strain, the silent plea for a sign, any sign, that her prayers were heard. Martha, meanwhile, had taken to pacing the house, her steps echoing her inner turmoil. She stopped by my bed, her face etched with worry. Lazarus, I've sent another message to Jesus. He must come soon. I fear, her voice trailed off, unable to voice the fear that I might not survive until his arrival. The night deepened, and with it, my fever spiked. Visions and dreams, or perhaps fevered hallucinations, filled my mind. I saw myself walking with Jesus along the Sea of Galilee, his words comforting, his presence like a balm. Yet, the reality was starkly different. My body was failing, and with each passing moment, the line between life and death blurred. The next morning, the village was abuzz with news. Jesus was on his way, but he had delayed, staying 2 days longer in the place where he had received the message. This news brought a mix of relief and confusion. Why the delay? Was it a test of faith, or was there another purpose? As the day progressed, my sister's faith was put to the ultimate test. Mary, usually the pillar of serenity, showed signs of breaking. Why does he delay, Lazarus? Why must we endure this? She asked, her voice a mix of despair and faith. Martha, however, found a resolve within her. Perhaps, she mused aloud, this delay is not for our suffering, but for something greater. Maybe it's to show the world what true faith looks like, what it means to trust in God's timing. The village, now a microcosm of the larger spiritual battle, was divided. Some villagers came to offer support, bringing food and words of encouragement, while others stayed away, their faith shaken by the unfolding events. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation and fear. Would Jesus arrive in time? Could he truly perform the miracle they all spoke of? And if he did, what would it mean for Bethany, for the faith of its people, for the very fabric of our community? As the sun began to set once more, casting long shadows over our home, a hush fell over Bethany. The air was charged with expectation, the kind that precedes a storm or a divine intervention. My breath grew shallow, my vision dimmed, and in that moment, I felt the weight of my sister's prayers, the collective hope of the village, and the profound silence of waiting for a miracle. As the shadows lengthened and the light of day dwindled, a sense of urgency permeated the air. My breath was now a labored whisper, each inhalation a battle against the encroaching darkness. Mary's prayers had become a continuous, desperate chant, her voice threading through the heavy silence of our home. Martha, ever the pragmatist, had ceased her pacing, now standing sentinel by my side, her eyes fixed on the door as if willing Jesus to appear. The village outside was in a state of quiet unrest. The news of Jesus' delayed arrival had spread like wildfire, igniting debates and prayers alike. Some villagers gathered outside our house, their murmurs a soft undercurrent to the tension within. Their faces were a mix of hope and fear, their faith tested by the unfolding drama. In my feverish state, I felt detached, as if I were both within and outside my body, watching the scene unfold. The room seemed to pulse with the collective heartbeat of Bethany, each person's faith or doubt adding to the rhythm. Then a commotion at the door broke the spell. Martha, with a sudden burst of energy, rushed to open it. There, framed by the fading light, stood a figure, his silhouette unmistakable, even in my weakened state. Jesus had arrived, but not alone. With him were his disciples, their expressions solemn, understanding the gravity of the moment. Mary, upon seeing him, let out a sob of relief mixed with a cry of anguish. She fell at his feet, her tears soaking the dust. "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died," she wept, her voice breaking through the silence like a lament. Jesus, with a gentleness that seemed to calm the very air around him, lifted her up. "Mary, your brother will rise again," he said, his voice carrying a promise that felt both comforting and mysterious. Martha, stepping forward, her face a mask of determination, confronted him. "Lord, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day." Her words were firm, yet there was a tremor of doubt, a silent plea for immediate action. Jesus looked at her, his gaze piercing yet filled with compassion. "I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live, even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this?" Martha, her resolve strengthening, nodded. "Yes, Lord," she replied, her voice now steady. "I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God who is to come into the world." The atmosphere shifted, charged with an electric anticipation. Jesus, with a calm authority, asked to be taken to where I lay. The crowd parted, their whispers ceasing as he approached my bed. He stood there looking down at me, his expression unreadable, yet filled with an intensity that seemed to reach into the very depths of my soul. "Lazarus," he called, his voice resonant, commanding yet filled with sorrow. The room held its breath. There was no immediate response from me, only the shallow rise and fall of my chest, a testament to life hanging by a thread. "Take away the stone," Jesus instructed, his voice now firm, echoing through the room and into the hearts of all present. Martha, with a sudden gasp, protested. "But Lord, by this time there is a bad odor, for he has been there 4 days." Jesus turned to her, his eyes soft yet unwavering. "Did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God?" The stone was rolled away. The sound of the stone scraping against the ground filled the silence, a stark reminder of the finality of death. The crowd outside, drawn by curiosity and faith, pressed closer, their murmurs now a hushed reverence. Jesus, with a solemn nod, looked towards the heavens, his voice rising in prayer. "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me." The tension in the air was palpable, the very essence of faith hanging in the balance. Jesus then turned his gaze back to the tomb, his voice now a command that seemed to shake the very foundations of the earth. "Lazarus, come out!" A collective gasp filled the room. The silence was deafening, the anticipation almost unbearable. Then, from the darkness of the tomb, there was movement. A figure shrouded in burial cloths emerged, stumbling forward. The crowd recoiled in shock, then surged forward in awe as I, Lazarus, stepped into the light, my eyes blinking against the sudden brightness. Mary's cry of joy pierced the air, her tears now of overwhelming relief and happiness. Martha, her hands clasped over her mouth, could only watch in stunned silence as I, her brother, stood before them, alive. The villagers, witnessing this miracle, fell to their knees, some in tears, others in silent prayer, their faith restored and magnified. Jesus, with a gentle smile, instructed, "Take off the grave clothes and let him go." As the cloths were removed, I felt the warmth of life return to my limbs, the cold grip of death releasing me. The air was thick with the scent of myrrh and aloes from my burial, but now it mingled with the fresh, earthy aroma of the living world. The Pharisees, who had come to challenge and question, stood by, their faces a mix of disbelief and fear. One of them, his voice trembling, whispered to his companion, "What does this mean for us? If this man can raise the dead, what can we do against him?" The village of Bethany, once divided by doubt and fear, was now united in a profound realization. Jesus was not just a healer or a teacher. He was the embodiment of life over death, of hope over despair. As I stood there, surrounded by my family and friends, the weight of what had just occurred began to settle. I was not just a man who had been sick and recovered. I was a testament to the power of faith, to the promise of resurrection. Jesus approached me, his hand resting on my shoulder, his eyes filled with a love that transcended understanding. "Lazarus, you have been given back to your sisters, to your community, not just as a sign of my power, but as a beacon of what faith can achieve. Go forth, live, and let your life be a testament to the glory of God." The villagers, now filled with a renewed vigor, began to disperse, their conversations buzzing with the miracle they had witnessed. Mary and Martha, their faces radiant with joy, embraced me, their prayers of gratitude rising to the heavens. As the sun set, catching a golden glow over Bethany, the village that had been on the brink of despair now stood as a symbol of hope. My story, woven by divine hands, was not just about my resurrection, but about the resurrection of faith in the hearts of many. And so I lived, not just for myself, but for the message that death is not the end, that faith can move mountains, and that in Jesus, there is life eternal. My days after that miraculous event were filled with a profound sense of purpose. I walked among the villagers, not as a man who had been brought back from the dead, but as a living testament to the power of belief. The days following my resurrection were not without their challenges. The Pharisees, now more wary than ever, watched me closely, their skepticism turning into a quiet fear. They whispered among themselves, their eyes following me as I moved through the market, as if my very presence was a challenge to their authority, to their understanding of the divine. But my sisters, Mary and Martha, they were my anchors. Their faith had been tested, and through that trial it had grown stronger. They spoke often of the lessons learned, of how the ordeal had not just changed me, but had transformed our entire community. "Lazarus," Mary would say, her voice soft yet firm, "your life now is a message, a beacon for those who doubt." Martha, ever the organizer, began to host gatherings in our home, inviting those from Bethany and beyond to hear my story, to understand the depth of Jesus' teachings. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment if you enjoyed this story. This will help us create more engaging stories for you.